welcome to Peak Dawn with Chris Hall and a wonderful returning guest, Dr. Theresa Bullard today. For those of you that want to check out previous episodes, we've had Dr. Bullard on the podcast several times now. She is a PhD physicist, a metaphysicist, an absolute veteran on Gaia, which is a wonderful resource for online video content if you've not checked that out already. And indeed, Theresa is a unique woman that really helps bridge the gap between science and spirituality. So Theresa, welcome back onto the show. I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with you again today.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure, and I enjoy our conversations because they go deep and they're very stimulating and engaging.
Exactly. I always say, like, go deep or go home.
Yeah.
Right? You may as well do it right. So tell me, how are you? I believe that you're back in the UK, but you've been to the States recently?
Yeah, I have been traveling quite a bit. I was on a tour through the United States, teaching with mystery school teachings. And then I am now back in the UK for a time, and I'll be heading kind of back and forth a bit over the summer. So yeah, getting settled into a new flow of life with the move and everything. And so I'll be kind of by, both in the UK and the US quite a bit back and forth.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you. Well, it's a big time of change, but I'm glad to see that you're getting back on the road and, doing the good work. And, that makes me think about, gosh, I was listening to a really good guy that was talking about natural law just yesterday. And his distinction was that when you have knowledge at a certain level, it's your moral obligation to share it. And that's really been striking a chord with me recently when I think about what I'm passionate about and what I'm here in the world to do. So, I guess that's a good segue to what we want to talk about today. And what's very present on my mind, and this is July 2021 for anyone listening to this, is that I feel like we need to have a conversation about reclaiming our personal sovereignty and also restoring balance. And what I mean by that is that, there's so many things happening in the world right now. It does feel like the world, or it seems sometimes like the world's becoming more divided. But amongst that perception, we need to be aware about where we're getting our information from. We need to be aware about the things we're giving our focus to. We need to be aware that there's a lot of fear mongering out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I feel like personal sovereignty is really crucial for recognizing, how are you your own, should we say, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual master? I mean, what do you think, first of all, about that? What about sovereignty, first of all, before we even talk about the rest and rebalancing it out?
Mm-hmm. I think it's such an important topic because, having sovereignty, having that ability to really assess what information is coming in and really assess whether this is resonant for us, true for us, whether we can see through the BS, and the indoctrination that's being fed to people at this time, and really, assess it from a place of being connected to the core of who we are versus it being personality driven or ego driven or driven by, shadow side and attachments and indoctrination and so forth. So I think that sovereignty really comes from knowing who you are at a very core level and being able to peel away the layers of faulty programming and having to meet other people's expectations and having to live up to who we think other people want us to be, and really come to be who we are and be really congruent with ourselves, and clear about our purpose as well, so that we can then make the choices moving forward in what we align with that ultimately serves that core purpose of who we are. And we can be strong even in the face of adversity, even in the face of differences of opinions that people may have. Even especially today, we've got all this cancel culture stuff. You're gonna trigger people at some point if you're really making an impact and you're making an influence. And so, if you're always trying to toe that line of what's politically correct or what's can I say things in a way that doesn't upset anybody, well, you're not in your sovereignty, right? Because you're going to be withholding a piece of what your message is or a piece of who you are. You're going to hold back your truth in order to not upset anyone. And that is not what I would call sovereignty. Sovereignty is, hey, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. I stand strong in that. Not everybody's going to like that, and I'm okay with that. But this is truly what I believe to be.
Absolutely. And when it comes standing for, what you believe in, let's think about this like you're a king, right? And the king energy very much exists within women as well. We have both in us, don't we, from an archetypal point of view. So let's imagine we're the king, and we've got the people on our border, and they're trying to invade upon our domain. And so with that literal visual, especially in today's world right now, I feel like we're all being pushed in one way or another. And if you don't know yourself indeed at that level and honor that, then basically what you're doing is you're allowing your borders to be invaded, aren't you? And you're not saying, whoa, wait a minute. You're invading upon my values, my knowingness about myself and what's important to be on my mission. That's not okay. Like the king energy is about defense as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Or the emperor. Very much that defender. Boundaries. I mean, it's important to have boundaries, but it's also that our boundaries are based on knowing ourselves again, right? And if we don't know what our core values are, then we're going to be able to be easily swayed by others. And yet, I think there's a place where it's like, okay, this is who I am, but it's not always just about ideology. Right?
No, not at all.
People in our world today can be so, this is what I believe, and anyone who believes otherwise, they're my enemy, and we have to, attack each other. And that has gotten really out of control. It's like we don't necessarily need to define ourselves by ideology or politics or, what position we take on different issues. It's about who are we at a core level, as an eternal being. The essence of who we are versus all of this sort of stuff that is more matrix oriented or materially oriented, right? So when we can get back to that core sovereignty of who am I at a core level that isn't defined by, my politics, it's not defined by my gender, it's not defined by my all these ways that people identify in our world today that's all based on physicality and materiality. There's something so much deeper at the core essence of us that is beyond this physical life. And that is where, when we can really tap into it, sovereignty starts to firmly establish itself within us.
It does. And what I find interesting, like, again, we're in 2021, we're halfway through now, right? And we're certainly not back to normal, right? I don't know if that ever will fucking happen again. But that concerns me. So, jokes aside, last year was about, in America and also popular political narrative, it was about whether Trump or Biden was going to get in, and it was the left and it was the right, and there's political correctness and all that. I'll be frank with you, I'm bored of that now. I'm really bored of that. And but what I'm moving on to, right? Because I'm like, I feel like I'm just, my focus is going elsewhere. So it's not, I agree with what you're saying, but where my focus is at now is from a natural right point of view, your natural law, the way that we are operating as intelligent beings in the universe, as sovereign, free-thinking beings that are meant to act with morality, to express consciousness, love, and expansion, and to do what is morally right on the basis of knowledge, the good shit. This is being, in my opinion, through our governments, right? One way or another, it's not about left or right, because it's gone way beyond that. It's gone into tyranny, in my opinion. And I don't want to make this politics. There's not, my intention to have a political, podcast here, because I know that we connect at some deep levels of the mystery school teachings, and of course of what, more universal truths are. The reason I bring all of that up, Theresa, is that, we're saying the world can be coming across, at least we can perceive it as being more divided. The thing that I'm deeply, deeply, deeply concerned about is that it's almost like we're being, some people like myself, I feel like I'm being forced out the woodwork to go like, whoa. No, you don't get to coerce me. You don't get to put me into fear. You don't get to manipulate me or control my natural God-given freedoms, because I answer to God and nowhere else. I do not answer to a government. Fuck that. So it brings out the 1776 spirit of rebellion against the British, which is ironic because I've got British heritage. Fuck those Brits. Happy 4th of July, by the way. But do you get it? So what I'm trying to get here is that the issues that I think we face in this world now are transcending traditional things of last year. You're right. And we've talked about that. Last year, we talked about that, right? But now I'm worried about the natural right freedoms that are being impinged upon. And that's why I wanted to kind of, I wanted to connect and get about this sovereignty thing from a know thyselfness point of view, because forgive my rant, you know how like in the Hermetic principles, you've got the microcosm and the macrocosm, and the Socrates thing of know thyself. I wonder, and I want to ask you about this, is it really incumbent upon us right now in these times to know thyself deeper than ever before? Because it's only when you know the microcosm of the individual self that you may be waking up to what the hell is going on in the world right now.
Yeah, 100%. I think that right now, like this last year, was a time for us to really be able to take advantage of the opportunity to turn inwards, to be introspective, to find that core self again, and to peel away the layers of all the distraction that we have had in our modern day way of life. And a lot of people did take advantage of that. I think a lot of people were reinventing themselves during this time. They were doing soul searching. But then there was also a big contingent of people that were just stuck to the computer or the TV, or and they were just being fed the information that was coming at them from media and from politics and from social media and popular culture and all of this and all the narratives that started to just it's like the shadow side of humanity really came out of the shadows yet over the last year and a half. And if they were glued to that narrative that was going on, it was like just all this shadow information that was coming in and trying to influence and distort people's perceptions and perspectives. But for those who were stepping away from some of that and really looking inside and peeling away the layers of, okay, well, this has been my normal, but is that normal really working for me now that it's kind of been taken away? How am I left? I'm left with myself, and am I happy or am I not? Am I good with being on my own? Is there something else I want to be doing with my life now that I've got this time? Like there was all this opportunity over the last year. And again, I think some people really took advantage of that and some people didn't. And, now we the people who were not integrating within themselves were getting more and more caught up in the shadow aspects that were coming out, and the anger and the judgment and the opinions and the all of this strife and greater and greater polarization. And you see like in the United States in particular, the politics really gravitate towards these issues, and they take different sides, left and right, take different sides of these issues, even if they really have nothing to do with politics. They have to do with health, or they have to do with, mental well-being. And yet they take sides on it because it's an issue, right? And so they're always polarizing each other more and more and more. And so it's like, there's just all this, this opinions that come in and influence people's perspectives. And then there's this expectation that you have to pick a side on the issue and toe the political line with it. I don't think that that's necessarily the case in every country, but it's like so starkly the case in the United States. And I think that that's a microcosm of what's happening at a global scale. And so this narrative is really infringing upon, our sovereignty, because it's requiring people more and more and more than ever to be towing that political correctness line, whichever their side may be. And then it's creating more and more separation between people. Even families have been, torn apart by.
I've experienced it myself. There have been friends and family members that, unfortunately, I don't have a relationship with right now, because it's been very divisive, and it's incredibly sad.
It is sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. I get it, and I agree that health has become politicized, right? As an example. Yeah. 100%. And
so we need to really find that core within ourselves again in order to see through, because whether you're left, right, they're both sides are spinning the story, right? And both sides are trying to manipulate the narrative. And right now you have this minority of people really who are very loud, who are dictating the narrative because they're the ones who are so loud about it. And meanwhile, I think there is a silent majority. There is a large number of people in the, you know, kind of somewhere still in the middle who feel probably alienated by what's going on. And not like, yeah, this doesn't represent me. I don't know where I fit in any of this. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I don't agree with that either. And, you know, they can think for themselves still, right? They still have some of that sovereignty and discernment and so forth in their thought process and knowing what's true for them. But the problem is there's so much vitriol online that there's a fear almost of speaking out because then you're going to get canceled, or you know, and they look at the people who do speak out and then they get canceled, like, oh, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to stay out of the fray. So there's a silent majority that's staying out of the fray, and meanwhile allowing the minority to dictate the narrative. And it's going to not just dictate the narrative, it's dictating policy making, it's dictating where the world's going, you know, and, you know, one of the things that we have to be more careful about than the people who are, you know, what is it that all that is needed for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing?
To do nothing, exactly right.
Yeah.
Bang on. I completely agree. And for the silent majority out there, I love you and I'm fucking with you, and carry on listening because there's more to come. No, exactly right. I agree. It takes courage. Another example of, you know, you need the courage energy to step into sovereignty as well as knowing yourself, right? I mean, I want to tell a story from what I did today, but I'll share that cheeky one for later. But before I do you think there's any connection between fear and the shadow work? And just let me kind of set the scene for that. Last week on the podcast, we had a wonderful lady called Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she's a neuroscientist based in Texas, a South African neuroscientist. She's awesome. And we talked about literally the relationship of fear, anxiety, and anger, and how that can basically shut down all these different areas of your brain, right? And when you're in that fear, whatever, you know, mindset, brain creativity, physiologically is shutting down, right? So the problem with allowing ourselves to stay in that fear, anger, anxiety complex, which is, you know, you only have to switch on social media or God forbid, the television to get that, right? So let's go back to the spiritual thing. We know that the shadow side exists within us and it can relate to different archetypal energies. We know that. And we know that we need to integrate the shadow to become a more rounded human being. Like, I don't deny the shadow parts of myself, right? But just out of interest, do you have any take or any thoughts on whether is the shadow elements of the different archetypes being amplified by fear porn?
Well, yeah. So, I meit's the more that we're plugged into the media or to online world, and the more there's some enemy, there's a potential threat, there's, you know, it's constantly, there's some drama, there's some murder, there's some, you know, it's constantly keeping us in fight, flight, fear response, right? So it's keeping the old brain very activated, and the amygdala and it, you know, kind of hijacks the higher cortex and our ability to think and discern and be creative, as you're saying. And yeah, we're much more easily controlled when we're in that kind of a mode. We're not in our sovereignty. Now, we can get to a point where through practices like meditation, introspection, you know, contemplation, self-reflection, all of that, spiritual practice can really help us to get to this place where we can feel the fear but not let it hijack, right? Where we can maintain a certain level of self-composure, inner peace and calm, even while there's a storm going on around us. And, you know, that is, I think, also another piece of that core sovereignty, is that you become the eye of the storm, that no matter how much of a storm there is around you, you can be that peaceful calm in the center. You can still maintain that light, that clarity, that be almost like a beacon of light for other people, because you have this ability to remain calm and balanced amidst the storm and the chaos going on outside. And that comes, again, from that core inner place. Now, the only way to get to that is to have faced your own shadow, right? Because all of those places where we get into attachment, where we get triggered by those fears, is in our shadow. And so to the degree that we haven't addressed our shadow, it's going to be able to hijack, right? And so to the point that we can look at it and see it for what it is and recognize it and go, oh, yeah, okay, this is a part of me, but that's that part and this is the wounding that, I've addressed time and time again, so that it doesn't have to hijack me as much. And so to the degree that we really do that inner work, then, we integrate those pieces and we can become that core, and we don't have to be so swept up by it when it gets, reflected out in the world.
Oof, nice distinction. I love that connection between recognizing the shadow work, doing the work on your shadow, and how that links to being the eye of the storm. Because we could just say, meditate and be the eyes of the storm, and that's absolutely valid and so high worth. But when you make that connection between, it's almost like the little gremlin trying to get in, and you go, ha ha, you're not getting in here. Nah, yeah. I know what you are. That's just a trigger from trauma. That's just my this. That's just my that. I'm cool. Right?
I like a bit of what we call spiritual bypassing sometimes, where, it's one thing to meditate all day long and be up in the monastery or up on the mountaintop, removed from what's going on in the world. It's easy to maintain your peace when you're removed from it, right? And so, you can just be meditating all day and bliss out and just, become detached or disassociated from what's going on in the world, but that's not going to change anything, right? So the real challenge is when you can be in the world, not of it, not hooked by it, but in it, and be an active participant in it, and yet still be able to maintain that calm, that center, that sovereignty while engaging with it, rather than blissing out and disconnecting from it. So it's about living your spiritual practice, but while also living in the world. And, it's a difference between a Western mystery approach versus an Eastern mystery approach. Both are valid, but, if we want to change the world that we're living in right now, we're going to have to be engaged in it. We can't just meditate on the mountaintop and hope that everything else is going to ripple out, because there's too much static going out there in the collective. We have to be actively helping bring the collective with us if we want to create that coherence at a collective level, and see it manifest in the world.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. And I've heard it may have been you, so forgive me from quoting you. I've heard it talked to about before, where the concept of the temple is the connection point between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. And it's all about sitting in the middle point, energetically, spiritually, so that you can be connected to both worlds.
I love that. That wasn't from me, whoever it was. I love it. And I would add to that we are the temple, right? That we are meant to be the temple. And yes, we could talk about that from a physical temple perspective, as a house of God, or, a place where spiritual and physical can connect. But in the Western mystery school tradition, it's about us establishing that temple within. And it is a practice. It's something that we build and we create within ourselves. It's an energetic structure that we can hold around us, and that creates the space in our field so that we can continue to anchor, and be that bridge between above and below. Nice.
Okay. Can I tell you a fun story from today?
Absolutely.
Talking about being in this world, right? You might, this will either offend you or you'll get a giggle out of it, but let's just go for it. Okay, so in Australia, right now we're in the middle of a quote lockdown, blah, 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 and all that stuff. I'm very against that stuff. I do not agree with it. That's my personal stake, but I'm sick of holding that back, and I'm just going to express that. So that's that. But when it comes to masks, right? So masks are quote mandatory in Australia right now. And what I've been learning about is the difference between a mandate, which is basically a directive, but it's like the wagging figure of government saying, you've got to do this, versus the law. And you've got natural law and you've got acts and all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of deep rabbit holes of knowledge we can go down there. But the point is that it's very clearly said that you do not have to wear a mask if you have a valid medical exemption, a medical exemption, right? Which I do. And so what I've done is I've printed off some wonderful informational pamphlets that were put together by a consortium of lawyers across Australia that empower both business owners but also customers to know their rights so that they don't feel scared by the police Stasi state that we are currently living in. And so I thought, fuck it, it's time to get off my arse, stop just following social media and expressing myself in a fucking echo chamber to my friends that also believe this. Forgive me for swearing, I'm feeling very piped up today.
Passionate about it.
Passionate, I am, because it's infringing upon my liberty. And so what I've done at the grassroots level is I had a lovely conversation with 4 cafes, the surf shop, the this, the that, and And then I posted lots of pamphlets around town, and I took grassroots action at my local community level, because I want to be able to walk to town and walk in without a mask and order a coffee, or, you know, go get whatever I want without either being actively discriminated against or feeling like I can't do that. And so I went and had a conversation. And what I'm really happy to say, Theresa, which, you know, this is a whole like silent majority thing. 70 to 80% of the people that I spoke to, they were like, yeah. And like, you know, when you and I can connect, I can see there's a level of consciousness in your eyes. I was connecting with people, and I could see that they were already there, most of them. And they're like, yeah, no, and I agree. And that's really interesting. And thank you for sharing that. And good on you for having this. And there was a lady from South Africa as well. And she goes, you know, we agree that this was like a medical apartheid that we're in right now, where, you know, there's two tiers of society bifurcating right now, because it's either have you got the vaccine or have you not? Are you wearing a mask? Do you agree with the government or do you not? You know, etc. Right. And this is the problem. Anyway, long story short,
there's a lot of stigma that's been created around it. So
much stigma. So that's my position. So everyone knows my position now. And again, I don't expect everyone to agree with me. I don't expect you to agree with me, and it's all okay. But the reason I bring that up, Theresa, is that if I had just looked at my phone only, right, social media would have told me the things that it will either reinforce the things I believe with, or it'll trigger me with the bad news that's trying to trigger me because it wants my attention. And it's that toxic little piece of digital media that's designed to do that. And I just had 48 hours without doing any social media. And interesting that I got off my arse and I went around and I spoke to people, and I realized that I got out of my head and I got out of the screen, and I saw human connection with people in front of me. And I realized that, yep, there it is. There's other people who think like that too. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of a documentary that came out not that long ago called The Social Dilemma. And I highly recommend it. It was really eye-opening and very well done, you know, by the people who were behind the scenes with creating social media and you know, the virtues and vices of it, and how we have to be careful about letting it reinforce our own narrative, right? And whether that's, you know, whether you're left, right, conspiracy, you know, or otherwise, you know, it just reinforces. And it's almost like creating a matrix within a matrix within a matrix. You know, you have your belief system, and then your online reality reinforces that belief system. Even though the bigger reality, the real reality that's out there, might have a lot more gray zone than what your, you know, kind of reinforced online reality is doing for you. And I think it's important that people realize again that there's multiple sides to this issue. It's not so black and white, you know, that there are people who have special circumstances. There are, you know, valid reasons for getting vaccine or not getting vaccine. There are valid reasons for wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And there's no one right way. And so if we can stop creating a stigma around it and shaming people around it, and or ostracizing, and start getting into remembering, like, everyone is unique and they have unique circumstances, and I don't know their circumstances. So I'm not going to make any judgments based on something I don't know, you know, and just because that's what's being programmed or fed to us by government or media or, you know, the WHO or the CDC or whoever, right? It's like we need to, again, learn to choose and discern for ourselves versus the matrix narrative that's happening, or the matrix within the matrix narrative.
And I was brought up with good family values around, you know, treating people with humanity, respect, and indeed the uniqueness, right? So that's, again, I call these things out. You know, I must emphasize that I don't tell that story just to kind of like state my perspective and position on things. I state it because I want to kind of say that I'm not afraid not to anymore. Because I feel like, you know, I said this to a guy in the shop today, and I said, basically, a lot of the world is either afraid of COVID or afraid of what the government's going to do to them. But actually, there's a third way. And that third way is that I'm not afraid of either of those two things. And I am becoming more realized and more in my personal sovereignty as it, because I'm getting to know who I am. And I'm actually having the courage to express that in the world, and realizing that perhaps others think that way and I'm not the only one. And therefore, I'm not obsessed and paranoid, and I'm releasing all the chains of fear because I'm speaking to people like actual humans, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this comes to a really important point, and that is that, you know, because there's so many people out there right now who they are getting angry at the government or whoever for taking away their liberty and their sovereignty, and yet sovereignty comes from within, right? And
Yes.
there are a lot of people out there right now who are crying victim, right? Or
Mm.
they're identifying as victim. And a lot of them are just crying wolf, but because sovereignty and empowerment comes from within.
Mhm.
Victimhood is a choice that you see yourself as that, you know, you identify with that. I'm not talking about your circumstances or what's happened to you. I'm
Mhm.
talking about what meaning you give it and how you identify with it. And so if we want to come back to this place of true liberty, true internal, you know, freedom, and then being able to exercise choices, because one thing I've learned over the last 2 years is that even when you have a system that is creating rules and you know, laws and mandates and, you know, could feel oppressive, there's loopholes through it. You know, it
Mhm.
is a matrix, and there's always the back door that you got to find. There's always this way through, but you have to know and still have that strength of your own will and your own recognition that I have choice here. I can do things. I might have to work hard for it. I might have to get up off my ass and do something, but I can take action and I can make things happen by will alone. But I have to be willing to work, you know, within the system and find where the loopholes are.
Mhm.
And that is, you know, when you can really just be in that sovereignty, like I'm still going to create my life no matter what those external circumstances may be. I'm going to find my way through how to navigate these times. That's where, you know, we really have control of being the captain of our ship
Mm.
versus being, just a passenger on the ship that's going somewhere we don't want to go necessarily,
Mm.
right?
Amen to that. A monarch expresses and acts. They don't ask for permission.
Mm,
Right,
yeah.
literally, and that's how I'm feeling right now, and it's a good feeling because it's yeah, it's moving well beyond what you know, the antithesis of that, as you described. You know, you say if it's being taken away from me, then subtle distinction, as he said, is start acting free because you are right. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and you are a fully realized being with full sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
No one can ever take that away from you. Actually, it's one of the unstealable things. It can be wrong in what they try to do through coercion or lies or deception, but that's their moral fall down, not yours.
Right.
Right?
And you still have the choice as to whether you accept that or don't accept that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And there's so many narratives right now where this isn't just about governments either. I mean, this could just be, you know, peer pressure or that what the political correctness is, that what's popular in today's, you know, sort of mass culture.
Mm.
And actually, I think that with the cancel culture stuff, it's like we're no longer even making assessments on guilt or innocence based on a court of law anymore. We're making it based on a court of public opinion, and it's almost worse because you can destroy people's lives, you know, who are innocent, and there's so many more cases of that kind of thing happening. And so, you know, we need to really be careful to not just put it out there as, oh, it's those government people. It's every single one of us
Mm.
have a voice, and every single one of us have strength in, you know, a choice in the ability to change the narrative
Mhm.
and to influence, at least to have an influence in this narrative and the way things go. I mean, when you look at your politicians and so forth, they're looking at different factors. I mean, some of it, yes, okay, at first it was like, oh, it's all about the science, and great, okay, but you know, you got to balance between science and people and economy, and you know, there's all these different factors that went into their decision making. But I watched in California, for example,
Mm.
where it was, you know, the state was shut down, but then there was enough people that put pressure against the governor
Mhm.
to recall the governor, that all of a sudden, oh, now that you know, we can lift the restrictions because the governor wants to keep this position, and
Mm.
you know, the push that was coming against him was getting stronger and stronger and stronger because he was taking a very one-sided approach that wasn't really a balanced approach. And
Mm.
so, you know, the people still do have power, but we have to make those choices to take action.
Right? Well, indeed. And when it comes to politics and democracy and all that kind of stuff, on the basis that democracy hopefully still exists, on the basis of that, remember that they only have power if we give consent to that power, because that's what democratic is meant to be. But look, I mean, good. It's interesting. And then when I just to one final point on that story about today for me is that, as well as these distinctions around shadow being the calm inside the storm, I also know that knowledge is a way out of fear as well, isn't it? Because when you know things, then it gives you a strategy to realize that you don't have to be pinned down by certain things, whether it be knowing your rights or whatever else. So whether
it has to be the right kind of knowledge, right?
Oh, it has to be the right kind of agree. And it's not just the COVID thing and the politics of that and not that story. It's that knowledge is the way out, isn't it, of fear, though, I feel. What do you think about that?
Well, it's knowledge that is applied, right? So knowledge put into application and lived to actually see the results of that knowledge, that knowledge is true, that then brings us to understanding, right? Because there's a lot of knowledge and information out there right now, but not all of it is accurate knowledge or information. Like a lot of it is misinformation. Mm-hmm. And so just because you're armed with knowledge doesn't mean that it's actually going to lead to the right choices. You have to really be discerning about the knowledge that you're consuming today, especially on the online world. And, I mean, misinformation galore, whether you're talking from mainstream media, social media, conspiracy theory, there's all this stuff that's going on. And so the knowledge that I like to step back towards and use as a foundation, a touch point, is going to come back to things like natural law, and it's also going to come back to ancient wisdom, like Hermetic teachings and the ancient, the teachings that have stood the test of time, because they have shown to be truly delivering wisdom, not just knowledge, but wisdom, and it has been tried and tested and shown to be true, regardless of popular culture, because it stood the test of thousands of years, and they really understand that knowledge. It's not just information or somebody's opinion, right? And so that's where I think, there's a strong foundation of universal knowledge to step back on there. That's not about opinion. It's not about culture. It's not about politics. It's not about religion. It's not about any of that. It's about universal principles that can guide us through no matter what the times are. And that kind of knowledge, and you've talked often about the archetypes, right? So archetypal knowledge, and understanding how those dynamics work, and then how are they being played out right now in our lives, that is going to really help us navigate our way through these kind of crazy times that we're in.
Completely agree. Yeah, exactly right. And I've gone down multitudes of rabbit holes, and and some of them are misleading, some of them you don't know what to think, some of them just blowing your mind and completely change your life forever. It's such a mixture. And natural law and Hermetic teachings, and indeed archetypal distinctions, they're just foundational, aren't they? So when you can do that at the microcosm, then you apply it to the rest of your life, and it's the application as well as the understanding that really brings the wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so all right. Again, I'll try and not get political about this. I'll try my best. In the world that we live in, and I know that might mean a lot to different people, right? I get that. This is my perspective of what that means now. But still, is there any kind of archetypal dominance occurring, Theresa? So is there a dominance occurring in terms of, I don't know, whether it be popular culture of people that are just citizens of the world, or indeed governments or whatever? Is there any particular dominance of certain archetypes that's creeping in and is taking over a little bit too much, and therefore is not balanced?
Well, I think, for example, we have the adversary, the archetype of the adversary, or like if we look at the tarot, you have the devil card, right? Yeah. That is like everybody's, pointing at that's the adversary. They're the ones, they're the fault. They're the reason that we are in this situation. And, it's projecting, everyone's letting go of self-responsibility and projecting it out onto whoever that adversary is right now. And the fact that we are not being self-responsible is the issue. And when we won't we aren't willing to take self-responsibility, and then we project it elsewhere. That is, definitely the archetype of that devil card, or the adversary. It's like it's always something outside of us that we can blame, that we can fear, that we can point to as the reason for all of our ills. And meanwhile, it's inside, right? It's us. And when we can start taking self-responsibility again, that again is a key piece of sovereignty, self-sovereignty, self-mastery. We have to take responsibility, right? The king or the queen is always going to take responsibility for what's happening in their kingdom. And whether it's defending it, whether it's providing for it, whether it's, making sure that things are fair and just inside, that they are the ones who are ultimately responsible, because they're sitting at the head of that position of rulership in their kingdom or in their life. And so I think that's, the big one that we've been seeing. And this is something that I talk about in my book, The Game Changers, Social Alchemists in the 21st Century. It's like, that we're in this process of transformation, and there's these different archetypes that come through at different stages of that transformation. And right now we're at a dark night of the soul stage. Mm-hmm. And we have been really working with, facing that shadow. But if to the degree that we don't face the shadow, we project it out. And so there's always that sort of devil over there, or that adversary, that enemy, that we have to worry about. And then there's, the next kind of couple that come in with that is there's the tower, which is the destruction of the old way of life. And in the process, so we I orient through it with the tarot cards as 22 major archetypes, but they embody the same as the astrological archetypes, and the major archetypes are all there. But they tell a story of transformation through the sequence. And this is something that I cover in my season 4 of Mystery Teachings, is going through each of those archetypes one at a time, and showing how they show up in our lives. And so, the tower, for example, is we were building this structure, this tower of the self, and yet it was built on faulty foundation, or it's built on ego, or it's built on, greed or power, or whatever it was. We're somehow building that structure of our society on false premises. And so then at some point there's this lightning strike, this bolt out of the blue that shakes us to our core and rattles the whole structure, and things come tumbling down from it. And we can see that in our world today. The COVID was that bolt out of the blue that completely shut down our world and our way of life, and the way the old normal was completely rattled. And now we're having to go through this process of picking up the pieces and figuring out what we carry on with and what wasn't working, so that as we move forward, hopefully we're going to create a structure that is more integral, less susceptible to that kind of vulnerability, right? So it has greater strength. But in the process, we really have to go through the what to keep, what to discard. And there is a phase of separating. There's a phase of rooting out all the subtle impurities that have gotten in. But in order to root those out, we have to really face that shadow, inside, and go through this kind of struggle with our own inner darkness. And at a mass scale right now, that shadow is being very much vocalized and manifested in our outer world. It's not just hiding in the recesses of our subconscious anymore. It's really truly manifesting in our world. And so we're having to face it at a very physical level, not just at a conceptual level. And yet it is, as the micro, so the macro, the inner and the outer are reflections of each other. And so rather than always pointing the finger out there at those people and what they're doing, and judging an opinion, we have to look at where is this a reflection of me? Where is this inside of me? This separation, or this judgment, or this fear, or this victimhood, or whatever it is, and where can I find instead the courage, the strength, the inner warrior, the inner sovereign, the peace, keeper, and find all those different archetypes within me and get them working together rather than pulling each other apart. And that integration process is what we need to be moving into.
You might need to coach me here. The last year and a half, in my opinion, is one of the greatest injustices that I've ever seen on humanity in my perspective. And I find it really hard not to think that there's great evil going on in the world.
Well, there is. Yeah. And there's great good, but you don't really hear about the great good, I think. But there is great evil happening in the world, but I think it's happening inside of people. I think that the battlefield right now is in the mind of humans.
I agree. I think there's a psychological war happening, actually. I really do. I think there's a war for the psychology and the spirit. And I think there's great evil in the world. And so I get goosebumps as you explain the distinction. I think it's a really good one about the adversary. And one of the ways out is to balance other archetypes and indeed to take self-responsibility. I do agree with that very much so. In the paradox, sometimes you've got to do both, don't you? It's a paradox. You've got to be able to take responsibility, but also I can't be, and this is my perspective, I feel like I can't ignore this anymore. I feel like I can't ignore the evil. And so you can't, how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that? I know I just said how you do it, and I know you just told me, but when you've got such satanic energy in the face, how the fuck do you get out?
I think we have to be careful about, what we're labeling evil, right?
Okay.
If we label other people, like those people or that government or those, leaders or whoever, if we label them as the evil ones, now that's the adversary, right? That's the archetype that we're projecting outward of they're the evil. Whereas there are archetypal forces that are, good versus evil happening within the collective of humanity. And it's playing itself out on so many levels. It's playing itself out on individual levels. It's playing itself out on a mass level. It's playing itself out, left and right sides, it's playing itself out everywhere. And it's the narratives that are dominating the conversation right now. Those narratives are where that battle of them in the mind happens, right? And everyone's doing it on all sides. So we can't point to any particular group of people as they're the ones, right? This is where I mean self-responsibility. It's like, no, the battle's inside of me. And where in my mind am I allowing that battle to take place versus where am I putting practices into place to create a quiet pond within my mind,
right?
To create stillness within me, because only in stillness can we stop the polarity of this versus that, right? So bringing ourselves to that point of stillness and inner peace, that is where we win this battle. That is where we find our core again, our middle pillar, our center, where we can really be the eye of the storm is to create the inner peace. Whereas if we get so caught up in yes, there is issues in the world and yes, we have to address them, but that is going to have to start from us first being able to establish that 0 point or that point of inner stillness. Yes. And then from the stillness, let all action move forward, right? The movement comes from the stillness. The sound comes from the silence. What words to speak are going to come from that place of that inner core. And that is, where the work really is right now. And yet the more we're paying attention to this thing that's out here, the less we're paying attention to what's going on in here. And so this is the battle, right? It's so we have to be careful about who and what we're labeling as evil. Yes, there is a lot of evil happening in the world, but where the battle is happening is in the mind of humans, and it's within each and every single one of us individually, where we have to take self-responsibility to how am I contributing to that battle and to that collective unrest versus where am I creating peace within? And then from that place of peace, now I have clarity. Now I can discern. Now I can make choices and actions that are really going to serve a higher good versus just contribute to the problem.
Thank you. As you can tell from my complete honesty and vulnerability, this has been troubling me a lot. And I appreciate that. And you also make me think about the Hermetic principle of rhythm. So if we are the captain of our own ship and we're sovereign, yet just as I did then, I use certain words, and I admit I use certain words, and it invokes that energy, and it makes me feel upset and all of that. So I can take better self-responsibility for not invoking a storm amongst the seas on which I sail. Because if I am allowing my ship to be tossed around in the waves, I am missing the opportunity to be at the 0 point.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for your vulnerability and being able to, willing to express and just like have this conversation, because I think a lot of people are experiencing this. A lot of people are in reaction to what's happening in the world right now. And the more we are in reaction to the outer circumstances, the less we are in our position of being able to be at cause. Right? We need to be at cause rather than at the effect of things. So all of the Hermetic principles could be brought in right now. I mean, we have the principle of mentalism that it all starts with the creation in the mind, right? And then we have the principle of correspondence, where as the inner, so the outer, as the outer, so the inner, as above, so below. Then we have that principle of vibration, that everything is energy. And we just need to learn how to shift the vibration of whatever energy we're feeling. So if you're feeling anger, well, anger can also, anger, rage, but on the other side of that could be peace, right? So how can you shift the vibration of that to find that place of peace? And what are the tools that you can implement to shift the vibration? And then, you have rhythm, which is the ebbs and the flows, and that we have to learn how to navigate and be prepared for those ebbs and those flows and the cycle, and use it towards our advantage rather than be used by it. Then we have the principle of polarity. You have the everything is dual, and yet opposites meet in the middle, right? So how do we find that middle point? So instead of, the pendulum swinging so high to the left and so high to the right, we have to try and find ways to minimize the swing left and right and find that middle point, that place of balance that you mentioned from the very beginning. And then we have, cause and effect, which is how do we be at cause versus at the reaction or the effect of everything. And then we have, gender, which is about creation. It's about how do we harness both our masculine and our feminine and move that towards our creative ability, our creative work. And so, yeah, all of those principles, really play in right now. And that's, again, where we come back to the kind of knowledge that can help guide us through how do we navigate these times. And how do we find that place of sovereignty within ourselves so that we can really be making a positive influence and helping steer and redirect some of the things that are happening in our world from that place of that calm center.
Well, exactly. And it's kind of the calm center and embracing, let me throw a little metaphor in here, embracing the pressure cooker. So imagine if you got a pressure cooker, like for example, it makes me reflect on the fact that last year I launched an entire new brand to my business. It's an entire new, division. And then also over the last 6 months, like things have been amazing. Like things have been actually incredible and very abundant. So, and that's all come from embracing the pressure cooker, leaning into it and going metamorphosis, right? And you transform into something else. So there's so much, isn't there? By embracing that.
I call that pressure cooker the alchemy. It is when the heat turns up, usually the catalytic alchemy of transformation is really available to us, right? So rather than buckling under the pressure, it's like, lean into it or get excited about it, or how do we harness this in order to drive that transformational process consciously, and really take advantage of those energies of change that are available to us, but direct them in a good way versus just being at the effect of them. And that's really ultimately what the alchemy is about how do you become the alchemist of your own life? How do you really get conscious of that process so that you can keep the process moving from one stage to the next in a participatory way, in a proactive way. And yet, no matter what the circumstances are outside, we're always in the alchemical process. So it's about recognizing where we are in that process, and then what's the next stage we need to get to, and what do we need to do from where we are to get to that next stage. And those are all the things that I talk about in the Game Changers. And then I, how do we apply that also to what's going on in our world today? Our world is in a massive pressure cooker right now. We're going through the alchemy. It's not a guarantee that we're going to succeed at it, though, right? We might kind of get stuck in the process and have to fall back and repeat steps again. And we're right at that point where, we really need the cultural creatives, the people who are trying to step into higher levels of awakening and consciousness and be game changers and so forth in the world. We need those people who are leading this transformational journey to not lose the plot right now, because we're at risk of losing the plot, because I'm speaking to a lot of people right now. and so we have to really, it's like at this stage in the alchemical process that it requires such ingenuity, like the Emerald Tablets talks about, with great ingenuity, with great sagacity, with great skill. We have to navigate our way through this time of separating the subtle from the gross, or what we want to keep from what we want to discard. And it really takes skill and knowing where we're going with this, right? Versus getting so caught up in the challenge of what's facing us. And that's why I wrote that book, was as a sort of a little bit of a guide, to help us through those times of change. The user's guide or manual to how to keep moving forward through that alchemical process rather than getting stuck and sliding backwards. And what I deliver in Mystery Teachings, especially season 4, is trying to help us understand those archetypes so that we can keep moving forward, and you can see where we are in respect to the journey as well. Even in season 3, I talk about social alchemy and where we're at right now with the dark night of the soul and how to move through that dark night of the soul. So there are a lot of tools and resources, but we have to turn to those kinds of sources rather than all of the crazy stuff that we're being fed right now by
media. Drop social media, drop main narrative, drop all of that and go deeper, pretty much. What we're connecting on now, what I'm realizing is that the pressure cooker, the alchemy, that's a process of transformation, I think, definitely for the shadow elements of us. But also, is it also perhaps the process of transformation for when we've had one archetypal energy dominating and we needed to rebalance with other things, i.e., I don't know, is it applicable to that too, where we have a pressure cooker situation where we have dominance and we just need to rebalance, right? It's not just about shadow work, is it? It's about that too. Yeah.
Every archetype, right? Every archetype has its vices and its virtues, its strengths and its weaknesses, or its clear expression and its distorted expression. And so we want to, with each of them, try to find that balance point. So one, we need to understand our relationship with that archetype. And then where are we manifesting on its clarity versus its distortion? And what do we need to do to bring it into greater clarity, right? To bring it to its balance point and then move forward from there to the next archetype. And as we go through all of the archetypes, then we learn to, at the end, integrate them all into one, where it becomes like that philosopher's stone, or that sort of indestructible core self where we really are, at the center of our creation. And that is, it's a journey. So it's alchemy within each one, and it's alchemy within the sequence or the progression through all of them.
Are we in the Great Reset or the Great Awakening?
I hope we're in the Great Awakening, but often you have great chaos preceding great growth. And we're at so many tipping points right now. And those tipping points are times of volatility, but also times of opportunity, because the littlest changes can make the biggest difference when you're at a tipping point. And so we just need the few, maybe the 3% of those who are awakening out of the masses, and going through that awakening individually. I think there are a lot more people doing that. And I think this last 2 years have been a wake-up call to help spur that even further. But it's really important that we focus inwards to do that. But when we get that, just that small percentage, 3% creates the snowball effect that we need for then to reach the 10%, to then reach the spontaneous, evolution or awakening of the mass consciousness.
I hope so too. And the empowerment and the sovereignty of who we are indeed, is that it comes back to the core of what we started with. You must look within, but also act in this world. And then the acting in this world needs to be with self-responsibility. It needs to process through the shadow work. It needs to transform into new things and
come from a place of balance.
Right?
Versus the pendulum swing or the reaction, right? Really come from that place of balance, which we're going to achieve that balance through inner stillness and peace. And
it's
clarity.
Not passive. And that I can't emphasize that enough, right? Because the New Age movement, and this is not bad mouthing, but like I'm making a cultural comment, the New Age movement has a little bit of a risk to be passive sometimes, right? So it's important to be active as well.
Yeah. It's important to realize that what's happening in our world is very real, right? It's like there are some teachings out there that say, oh, it's all an illusion, none of it matters, just, meditate, be in your peace and bliss out. And then that'll change, but it's not. Like there is a real world that's happening out there, and we need to be actively engaged with it to help transform it. We're here to be alchemists. We're here to actually actively work on the world to help its evolution and transformation. And so, absolutely get into your peace and be in your joy and that state of love, and then carry that forward into the world and share it with others and help others find that peace, that joy, that love. And that is how we're going to change the world.
Help others. And I really would love to kind of, wrap this up on a very important note of again, digital culture. Remember that social media will only reinforce the echo chamber that you're in. And as he's saying, it's a sub-matrix of a larger matrix. And as well as that, it will trigger you, because it will put the things that piss you off in front of your face. That's what it does. It's designed to keep your attention. So the inner work and the work at the community level that we're talking about in terms of helping others, I think it has to happen. I think we have to go back to grassroots human connection, real conversations. Really this right now, even if it's digital, I'm a human connecting with a human, not just like looking at a little soundbite snippet. Deep.
Real connection, soul to soul, right? And I think interacting, over the last month, it was such a joy to be able to gather again in community, but with purpose, and not just like, let's party, but it was with purpose. It was with intent, and to gather together and share light, share joy, share that love, share that sense of community, be in a place of empowerment. And it felt so renewing, and it helped us to kind of shake off all of the energy that, it's sort of been building up, all that tension that's been building up through all the isolation and all of the stuff we've been getting fed over the last year, as we've been in that lockdown mode. And so I think it is really important for us to recognize that we are human, and human nature is one of bonding and connecting, and that we need that connection, not just virtual life. We need real life. And it's important for us to start remembering there is a real reality out there, and that the online world, while it can be a tool that we can use in a good way, it can also be a tool that can be used towards ill. And we need to get back into a little bit more of tangible, objectivity, not just subjectivity of what's going on, and really look at the world that is physically in front of us.
Goosebumps, truth. I feel so much better for this, both intellectually and my spirit. Means a lot.
Good.
Thank you. So
thank you.
Seriously. I really acknowledge what you're doing, getting back out on the road, so to speak, doing this stuff is exciting to see that. And I look forward to that too. Now, you were mentioning, just for the benefit of people, you were mentioning that indeed you're doing a new revision of your book, and I think that will be coming out over the whenever that is. Can you tell us about when you're intending to re-release it, where people might keep an eye out for that? What could they do?
my goal is to have it out this summer. So I originally published it in 2012, and there's been a lot that's happened in our world since 2012. So just over the last 9 years, so I thought it was time for an update. And I've expanded the Game Changers book, Social Alchemists in the 21st Century. And so we're coming out with the second edition here, which is updated and expanded, and it'll be coming out in the next month or two. So stay tuned for that. So by the end of the summer, it'll be ready. And I think it'll be a really helpful tool for what's going on in our world right now. And also mystery teachings, people can check that out. Of course, I am a teacher for the Modern Mystery School, so I always believe in the tools of the Modern Mystery School to get life activated, to get initiated, to really learn, some of the core teachings and of the ancient mystery tradition. And the tools really is where the real work is, and where the real transformation is in using the tools of empowerment that really put that power back in our hands to become the sovereigns of our life, to really step into our own empowerment and our self-mastery. And that is what we are all about at the Modern Mystery School.
This is where the great work is. So for the listeners, focus on the great work, which is yourself.
Yes.
It's so many good things happen for it. It's such a wonderful ripple effect. And I really do love you for that. And I think it's incredible what you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
Wow. Oh, very good. Well, I'll put all of that in the show notes.
Thank you. And when we all, as people who really want to be positive influencers in the world or help make this world a better place, as we do that great work upon ourselves, and then we step into service to others and helping others also accomplish that great work for them, that is how we change this world for the better. Right?
Absolutely. And Theresa, I want to offer a word of encouragement in case you weren't thinking of this already. You have such a lovely presence in terms of obviously the work you've done in Gaia and on stage. Would you consider doing a recording of your book on audio?
I would consider it. Yeah. I don't really know right now how we would do that, but yes, I would definitely consider it.
And the thing is, the reason I say that is a bit of a selfish request, but I think it would be popular too, is that certain people like myself, it would take me 6 months to a year to read a book, and I'd probably just, drop it and never do it. But if I have
it's a short book, just FYI. It's a very
sure. But
primer type book.
being quite transparent with someone like myself that's audio, it might be applicable to, I will listen to that book in a Saturday afternoon, and I will consume it, and it will all go in because it's my style of learning. So like your work is so important. So I think I only say that as an offering of encouragement to get your message out there, because it sounds like a really practical guide for self-transformation.
It is a message that I've been hearing and we are considering. I just need to find the right avenue to publish an audiobook. So
you got it.
Thank you for reinforcing that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. Listen, look, Theresa, thank you so much. Dr. Theresa Bullard, you have been an absolute legend as always. And I look forward to many ongoing conversations, and we will include links to your website and the book and your YouTube channel and all that stuff, the great stuff that you're doing out there. So thank you for coming on again today, and I look forward to reconnecting soon.
Thank you, Chris. Likewise. And I look forward to sharing this conversation because I think it'll really help a lot of people.
Thank you.